her turn to come and read the other two poems. Lois Marie Harrod has published a lot. She's had 14 collections of poetry, including 2 that came out in 2013. Also edited a book about poets and teaching. She teaches at the Creative Writing Center at the College of New Jersey.
I'm Lois Marie Harrod, and I'm reading my poem, Giorgio Morandi. For those of you who are not familiar with Giorgio Morandi, he was a 20th century Italian painter and printmaker who specialized in still lifes. He painted what I think of as meditative pots and pictures right through World War II, and President Barack Obama has chosen 2 of his paintings for the White House. Giorgio Morandi. Speak softly, he said to his colors, and as for the knife, only the sort that gnaws bread. The fruit has been eaten. The tipped bowl remembers its porridge. But what else could he paint? All those broken bottles falling from the skies, and when the war ceased, what was left? A table, a bottle, a little bread. This much of my life eaten, still life, natura morta. Peaches shrivel, but bottles remain. It is enough in this world to have a few things that hold. Doesn't the gray evoke road and snow? We do not need many notes to make a song. Sometimes the flasks seem women meeting in a piazza. Sometimes a holy family, bottle, pitcher, bowl. And what are we but vessels? How can we have done so much harm? Let us sit here, quiet, no shouting, like a poet who uses only a few words, candlestick, bow, ink, pot, urn. Isn't it better than rearranging buildings? Let the tabletop become the earth.
My sister says that she was reading an article of a Roman shipwreck full of wine jars found off the coast of Albania. I was the sister who found the article. In the poem, a vessel or amphora is speaking. Vessel. The weaker I am, the less I misunderstand. These chinks, my metal and pry, the places you've entered, my mouth, my neck. You have put your hands here and here, and what I take in, you pour out, which is why I understand oil and wine, sand and clay, what I am and what I contain. But what did I know of you, who trusted me to the Mediterranean, that middle sea between us? You sank me in tempests, and may find me yet glazed and cracked, cork intact. The title for this next poem is a cliche, often used in news articles in referring to continuing military operations. The poem talks about the randomness of destruction and environmental degradation. Given these operations are ongoing, if a small femur fell from the sky and landed on a magnolia leaf right here, where you can see it as you descend the steps this morning as you leave for your walk, you might think it was the first drop of bones, the way you sometimes feel the first drop of rain and then wait for the next, which usually comes in 2s and 3s, like children straying down the sidewalk after the school bus drops them at the corner. And then the downpour, and you are back again in that terrible gymnasium where adolescents are screaming, and you have been assigned crowd control. Who knows which one will lose his balance and tumble from the bleachers, or God forbid, though you have given up belief in protective gods, the whole section will collapse and the bodies thunder down, layers and layers of ribs and teeth, mammoths, saber-toothed tigers, passenger pigeons, sea cows, the heavy-footed ox. But this is such a small bone, the sort you used to pick from owl pellets in the 8th grade, and only one, and now touching it, you can't remember if it is the femur of a mouse, or a mole, or a sparrow. They are all different, and the chart has blurred in your mind. You aren't even sure it is a fever. Maybe it is a small shoulder blade. Yes, let's say it is the shoulder blade of a black-eyed junco, and there on the leaf beside it now, the skull of the smallest shrew.
And the last one I'm going to introduce, and I should step back, I should have mentioned earlier, there are books upstairs. Some of the finalists, Mimi Herman, is Edison here? Edison Jennings, Andy Young. Andy, they have books up there, books by Betty Adcock. So on the break, be sure to go up, check out the books, check out the North Carolina Poetry Society table. Mimi Herman, I can actually say, I knew Mimi Herman when she was a fiction writer, you know, because that's what she was doing when I first met her. That's what I was doing when I first met her. I was writing fiction too, you know, so that was kind of fascinating. And I knew her through United Arts Council working in the schools. What was interesting about that is not that she was working in the schools, that also on that roster was Suzanne Newton, who was her teacher, who taught her at Merida. You know, so I think it's probably the first time in the history of this country where you had a teacher and student in the same school's program. Mimi has her MFA from Warren Wilson, which increasingly I've noticed with people who submit to us, producing a wide number of highly skilled poets. So let's hear from Mimi.
Thanks so much. This is an amazing festival, and I'm honored to be a part of it. The first two poems are a series I've been writing about hard words to see in print and hard words to hear, trying to figure them out. And when I submitted this poem, I didn't write the whole word out, but I think it's important to take some of the power out of the word by saying it out loud, so I apologize for the difficulty in hearing it, but this poem is called Nigger. Never bigger than a finger on the trigger, it could shoot you in the back. It could string you up from a tree that had grown all those years beside the road. It said, "Too big for your britches," as if the speaker's itches for power hadn't split the seams of discontent. Wherever that word occurred, violence went. It was the leader of a mob. The job of its followers was to ensure you never got any bigger. It's a word that you don't hear very often, but growing up Jewish in the South, I was very aware of. Kike. Neighbors hoarded the word until, full of empty, they launched it in the air. There it floated, a thing of sticks and string, held together by exquisitely thin skin. Once aloft, it could not be reeled in. Its tail trailed the unswept chimneys, gathering soot and must, should and dust. On the tracks below, an engine started with creak and grind, pulling cattle cars full of never mind. A storm tore it loose, the wind picked it up, dragged it through a battle of myth and kind. Neighbors herded the word until, full of heart, they thrust it in the pockets of their Sunday clothes. They stored it in the stockyards. They swept it through the streets. They ground it into the dust that settled after the ashes rose. And this last one is not from that series, but it's called Grief. Grief bisects me like a fault line. Grief sections me like an orange. Grief dissects me when the fault is mine. In grief, keep different sections separate, but synchronize your grief with mine. Grief infiltrates me like an undercover agent. Everyone's grief becomes mine. Grief weeps lemon juice and pulp, burning the cracked skin. Grief speaks in the language of lava. Grief can't afford to be languid. Seek grief before it finds you. Build fires to burn everything in grief's path. Who can see past grief? Grief is luxurious. It spends you. There is always a tax on grief. It will clean out your accounts. It will scrape the numbers off your clock and leave the face clean, dripping with time you might have spent with the one you're grieving for.
Hello, my name is Erdoğan Göknar, and I teach Turkish and Middle Eastern Studies at Duke University. I'm both one of the organizers and also was one of the judges this year. It's wonderful to see this event in its 7th year. When we began this, we didn't think it would go this long. We're happy to see that it has. Every year I kind of say a little bit about why I think this event is special, and I'll keep it brief, but I'll do it again this year. So it's a wonderful mixture of both community and academia. We have a comparative aspect where Nazim Himet, in a sense, is not always mentioned, or his poems aren't always read. He's not always the foreground of the event, but he is compared to another poet of similar stature. We have the workshops that are ongoing. We have now a translation award, and along with that, we are encouraging the publication of books, book-length translations into English from Turkish. As I look forward, it seems to me that in a couple of years we could have an anthology based on the winners of this award. And we have, along with the event itself, usually some artistic or musical aspect or interpretation, and not least of all food. And the food is very good. Couldn't get through without that. The next winner is Emily Jager, who is a returned Peace Corps volunteer and backyard organic farmer who dreams in 4 languages. Is Emily here, by the way? Okay, all right. I'm very curious about it. We don't know what 4 languages she dreams in, but I'm very curious about that. An MFA candidate at UMass Boston and Lambda Literary Fellow. She is co-editor and co-founder of the Window Cat Press, a zine for young emerging artists. Her writing has appeared or is forthcoming in Incessant Pipe, Soundings East, and the 4-Way Review, among others. So,
Hi, my name is Emily, and I'm going to be reading 3 of my poems, Nostalgia, Beekeeping, and the Autopsy. Nostalgia. Sing me one more yellow song of oblivion, the neighbor's curse chant as he leads the plow, drooling oxen pirouette 8 legs into a single row. Last year, I planted 2. Foot-pressed yucca stems into waterlogged earth. The taju trees bloom, 7 days of yellow, the last spoonful of winter cupped in frilly trumpets. The seeds are underground, and we can still dream of tubers larger than thighs before they sprout. I've returned my fields to the weeds. It's how I say I've left. Beekeeping. You approach from the back, shed your human smell between reeds of lemongrass, holding coals in tin jars, accordions pumping. When you slide the knife through waxed over creases, you pull off the wood cover to find the moon of 1,000 bodies humming, oxygen of fan wings, mountains and gorges of hexagonal print wax, larvae capped in for the winter. Honey, smell it through the smoke in your fingers. As you sort through the planet frame by frame, the workers bump your face, breasts, shoulders, convex of kneecap, thread your yellow constellation for one instant onto the morning air. The autopsy. From the painting, Female Corpse Back View, Hyman Bloom, 1947. O gentle ones, grasping your scalpels like lace makers, what would you discard as no heart, no brain, no lungs? The cumbia winding down the calm of her spine, buttocks thick from sitting August in the cumin pepper smell of her sweat, lying alone for years, lying with love and dogs at her feet. You drained the blood, picked the cauliflower-edged tumor from her uterus, ridden and left. Now the resting hum. Now the white room and this week's cool earth wanting her. Empty hands folded beneath the chest. Thank you.
The next finalist is Anne Whitehouse from New York City. She's the author of 5 poetry collections, The Surveyor's Hand, Blessings and Curses, Bear in Mind, One Sunday Morning, and The Refrain. Her novel, Fall Love, will be published in Spanish as Amigos y Amantes, 2015. Born and raised in Birmingham, Alabama, she graduated from Harvard College and Columbia University and lives in New York City.
Hello, I'm Anne Whitehouse. I'm honored to have been selected as one of the winners of the Nazim Himet Poetry Competition. I'm sorry I can't be with you today in Cary, North Carolina, but I'm honored to share with you one of my prize-winning poems. I am reading Calligraphies. Calligraphies is a persona poem written in the voice of an actual historical person. Some of you may recognize him because he's rather famous. Calligraphies. Cao Guoqiang speaks. In the old days in China, my father collected calligraphy, ancient scrolls, and rare books. We lived in Guangzhou, across the strait from Taiwan. We could hear artillery batteries firing into the mist at the island that still resisted the mainland. My father's calligraphy was delicate and adept. I used to stand at his shoulder, careful to leave space for his arm to move freely, as I watched him wet the ink to the right consistency, select his brush, and dip it gently and carefully, soaking the soft hairs of the badger, and stroke its sides against the jar, forming a point like no other, soft, flexible, yielding. With an intake of breath, he raised his hand and held the brush, hovering above the paper, and slowly exhaled until he was an empty receptacle. And then, and only then, he touched the tip of the brush to the fine rice paper. The strokes flowed, deft and sensitive, forming the ancient shapes of the words. Then came the Cultural Revolution. My father worried that his books, his scrolls, and his calligraphy were a time bomb ticking. He buried his collection in a hole in the earth of the cellar, but he was still afraid, and little by little he began to burn it at night, in secret, in the hidden depths of the house. After afterwards he was not the same. He lost himself in a strange self-exile and left us all, his family, behind, finding perilous refuge far away in the mountains in a ruined Buddhist convent where an old crone of 90, the last remaining resident, gave him sanctuary. There he would take sticks and write calligraphy once more in puddles on the ground that would disappear as soon as it was written, leaving invisible skeins of sorrow in the changing reflections of cloud and sky on water. I am his son, and my calligraphy is fireworks, my art gunpowder, as evanescent as writing on water. Pinyin, the Chinese word means fire medicine, invented by alchemists investigating immortality. My explosions are brief dreams where space and time combine in a momentary universe of birds, fish, and animals, little-known symbols, the stream of the Milky Way, energy transformed into chaos. In my youth, a shaman protected me from the ghosts of dissatisfaction that were haunting me, freeing me to communicate the invisible within the visible. Some mysteries are meant to be discovered. Some are meant to remain heaven's secrets. I imagine an alternate history where the discovery of nuclear power was not used for making weapons. I dream of creating a ladder of fire far in the air above the earth, seen from worlds beyond our own.
So our next winner is Edison Jennings. I have a very short bio for you, so if you want to add something to this, please do. Please go on. Edison Jennings lives in Abington, Virginia. His poems have appeared in several journals and anthologies. Chicago Press published his chapbook, Reckoning, in 2013, and his work has appeared in top literary magazines across the country.
Well, this is a heck of a venue. I'm just pretty stunned. I came down from Virginia, obviously, and coming to Fancy Gap was really seriously socked in this fall. So I'm sorry for being late. That's my excuse. I'm just going to read two poems, because to be honest, I'm not even sure how many poems I submitted, so I know these two. Okay, so the first one is called Thin Ice, and doesn't really need any introduction. I guess I'll just say that it's set on the eastern shore of Maryland. Thin ice. 2 feet of snow had buried the fish-hooked reach of sand called Jacob's Nose, and ice sheeted the brackish Corsica from shore to shore, bridging snowbound farms to the snow-stalled town. Geese and ducks, bundled on the frozen shelf of river, chorused as I slowly stepped across the ice, slowly to be sure, no one near to hear or help, should I, God forbid, fall in. Now I think, maybe God forbade, because the ice was thin, and I sit here, stepping wayward lines, foot by wayward foot. Though water birds still fly across the bay, and footloose children still sometimes fall in. And this second one is called Trickle Down, and it does, so I guess, indirectly relate to the now infamous economic theory proposed by David Stockman and Ronald Reagan's administration. But it's not directly about that. Please don't think I've ever been to France. I never have, and at this rate, it seems likely that I never will. This is called Trickle Down. 4 houses, 6 cars, 3 wives, and 2 kids later, he's spared. Pension, stocks and bonds, all well balanced, except for him. So he went to France to despair in style. Over dinner, a lover asked him how much he was worth. A lot, he said, maybe more. Then went to his room alone, where he flicked the light, locked the door, thought, not much, maybe less, and poured himself too many drinks. Hours passed, the dark grew vast, sweeping Paris in its drift, while he sank to sleep, listening to the late night rain that rattled on the mansard roofs and slicked the cobbled Place Vendôme, the runoff sluicing through the gutters, down the storied sewers, into the streetlights silvered Seine, through his lot of nights to follow, into the North Atlantic, beneath the Borealis, and a wealth of worthless stars. Thank you very much.
The last but not the least winner is Andy Young. Before I read her very colorful and international background information from the program, I would like to express my personal connection with her. First of all, we both have the same bag from Turkey. And both of us, Nazim Himet is our personal and in-life hero for both of us. So with that, I would like to give her background information. Oh, she was in Turkey as well. That's another thing we had in common. Andy Young's first full collection, All Night It Is Morning, was published by Diagologos Press in November. She grew up in southern West Virginia and has spent most of her adult life in New Orleans, where she is currently working at the New Orleans Center for Creative Arts, Tulane University, and the University of New Orleans Intensive English Language Program. Now at this part, I know that her family lives here and she is visiting them. I believe some of her family members are among us today. We are so happy to see them. Well, Andy Young spent her last 2 years in Egypt. She worked at American University in Cairo and documented the revelation in essays, poems, and photographs. A graduate of the Warren Wilson Program for Writers, her writing has been published in 3 chapbooks publications in Lebanon, Egypt, Ireland, Mexico, and throughout the United States in places such as the Los Angeles Review of Books, Kalaloo, Guernica, and the Northern Anthology Language for a New Century. Her work also been featured in Passion Flamenca's play, Flamenclerica, Lore of the Miners, performed at the Joyce Theatre, Public Radio International's The World, the jury designs of Jean Pair, in Santa Fe's public buses, and its son is drawn from disaster exhibit and Paul Chan's Tree of Life project for the new museum. It's my pleasure to introduce you to Andy Young.
Thank you so much. It really feels like a blessing to be here because Nazim Himet is a personal and literary hero to me, and also because this connection of my family lives here and or nearby, and they're here, as well as a childhood friend that I didn't even know lived here, that I haven't seen for lifetimes. So this feels very special for me. Thank you. I think everything you need to know is in the title of this poem. On Syrian political cartoonist Ali Farzad's self-portrait, drawn in the hospital after his hands were broken. His lips dragged down, his gaze straight, revealing the sneer that might otherwise be taken as the sadness of Damascus, where he was left in a heap on the street. Praise the sneer, the wilting gaze. He ringed his left eye with ink to show the bruising, creased his face and pillow with lines jagged as stones, filled in the dip of his own neck, the tube in the crook of his arm. Praise the exactitude. His hands mummy-wrapped, broken fingers halved by tape and gauze. Somehow he unbent the middle finger of the right hand, made it jut. Praise the unbending above the others, away from its body. In 2 dimensions, it points to the heart. Praise the heart. Maybe the finger really didn't unbend. Maybe it's one of the fingers which does not work now. This is a self-portrait, how he sees himself, how he wants to be seen. In any case, he perched a pen, praised the pen, managed to shade his hair black and gray, his burned beard, his posture wincing against sheets. Praise the sheets on which he rests, the sheets on which he draws himself. Praise the ink, the printing presses churning in hidden rooms, the smudges on hands after touching news. Praise food stalls in occupied squares. Praise concrete pilings that smash down walls. Praise bandanas soaked in vinegar. Praise Fridays of chanting and chanting again, knowing nothing will change anytime soon. Praise the cartoons of Ali Farzad. Praise Ali Farzad's middle finger. And I think, somewhat like Layla, I have an eye in 2 places, or my heart in 2 places. I am married to an Egyptian, and we have 2 children, and we have been kind of raising them at this point in both countries, because the last 2 years we were in Egypt. And whenever we're here, we're always there, and whenever we're there, we're always here. So this is during one of those times when we were in New Orleans, but wanted to be back in Egypt for my friend Iman. Far from her in Egypt under curfew. We got babysitters so we could go to the square, cut lemons for our scarves, the small, thin, triangular ones, she said, were for people of the book. Wearing one, you could be any one of the 3 religions, she said, though her Egyptian self was seen as foreign, her clothes, her ways, her spot-on English. And I am always stared at, and Agnabi, though I'm told I have an Egyptian face. Those magnetic paper dolls on my fridge reminded her of that video, the headless kid in Syria, the father holding her up, looking into where her face wouldn't have been. Can we still speak of the ishtak, its perfumed cream, its seeds, something we could spoon? Speak of the afternoon light, flat and bright as a copper plate, clatter of men hawking tomatoes, water, a stone wheel to sharpen knives, the voice of that man who could barely shuffle, his hands out, his cry catching in his throat, Yarab, Yarab, Yarab. And I'll end with a love poem that came from the time in 2011 when the Egyptian uprising began, and Valentine's Day fell right in that time, and it was kind of hard to be romantic then. This is how I could get there, I guess. In you, the revolution. In you, the call to prayer in the middle of the siege. In you, the banners flapping, tent post staked. In you, the smooth face as water cannons pelt you, stitch of raw wound, sight remaining in the one good eye. In you, intake of breath against broken rib. In you, blindfold and soldiers' fists, quiet in pockets. In you, a kiss on the cheek of a cop thug, camel kindness, stepping over uncrushed skull. In you, the tank wheel stilled by the man draped hat-like across its apparatus. In you, the dust undisturbed by its tracks. In you, the pipe tapped to fill up the jugs. In you, the bread split and split again. In you, the salt and blanket, the greedy sleep. In you, the candle lit under the martyr's face, smiling from a frame, and lit frames of text message going through, tapping into metal. In you, sweet shop and Twitter, peaceful, peaceful, on powder feet, leaving a sugar trail. You ancient and just born, tea and smoke, as we watch as if through a window, a dark screen lit by gun battle, Molotov cocktails thrown from rooftops, and you are the cooking pot, used as a helmet, the corrugated tin to shield the blows. In you, the chunk of asphalt dug from the street. In you, the bandaged one with crutch standing ground. In you, that ground. In you, the revolution.
Before we leave the room for the break, I just want to say that we publish a book every year, and all of these poems are published in that book. So you can find copies from previous years actually.
Yes, actually this year it's set up upstairs with the rest of the books, authors and poetry societies display. So please do visit upstairs. If nothing else, it's an excellent place to be and socialize with your favorite poet. It's one of the goals, right? Enjoying the company of each other. As you can see, we are running ahead a little bit, but coffee and tea is there. It's ready. But I wanted to go through the program quickly. I'm going to start with the end. At 6 p.m. we will have a reception, and we truly hope that you can all stay with us to the reception. If not, come back around 5:15 because our invited poet, Betty Edgard, will take the stage and we will have the honor of listening to her. Before that, we have a brief section on Turkish poetry in translation. And of course, today, during this year's festival, we are honoring Russian poet Anna Akhmatova. That section will take place right after the break around 3 p.m. Again, we hope to... Did I miss any announcements? Richard?
We have music.
We have music, yes.
We do have 2 workshops coming up.
Please?
Yeah. Mentioned earlier that Jacob Press presents workshops with the American Turkish Association at the Turkish House, and the money from those workshops goes for the Himet Festival and also to pay the writers, because I think it's actually important to pay writers when they teach. But we do have 2 workshops coming up. If you're interested, let me know. On May 23rd, the workshops are always on a Saturday. They go from 1 to 4. With few exceptions, it costs $25 to participate. That includes 3 hours of workshop plus a feast of Turkish food afterwards and a reading by the featured writer. On May 23rd, Howard Kraft is going to be teaching a workshop on playwriting. Howard's most recent play, Freight, was sold out in Chapel Hill and is now being showcased in New York City to see if they were asked to bring it up there. And on June 13th, we're having a sort of fun workshop that we did before, food and, this is going to be prose maybe and poetry. Previously, Deborah Kaufman, Stephanie Levin, and myself worked with Denise Ender. And what we did a 3-course meal where you had to cook the meal, then you wrote. We did a writing activity, then you did cook the second part. We did appetizer, full meal, and then sort of like dessert. And so there were 3 writing components balanced with 3 cooking and eating components. So this time we're gonna do something similar, you know, and that's always fun, because it's a lot of fun, and actually some really good writing came out of it too. So, just wanna let you know.
Okay, great, thanks for the announcement, Richard. Again, since we are concluding our section on the competition, let's thank all the selection committee members and all the members once again, and see you later.